Okay, my name is Valerie Boggs. I work on Medicine at NCU as a clinical coordinator, and I did my project on multidisciplinary grounds, which will be referred to as MDR from now on, because that's a mouthful. Patient and RN preparedness. So for our scenario, we're having the nurses verbally prepare the patient for rounds. We usually come around about 10:15. We start our rounds at 10:15, and we often walked in and the patient was like, I have no idea what is going on. I don't know who you people are. And that is confusing and frustrating for them when they've had their assessment done, their medications given, and they're going to kick back and kind of take a little nap and hear a plethora of people come in. That's kind of surprising and not very fun for them. And then the nurse, so we want them to tell what MDR is, when it is, who's coming, why we're doing it, and where, which is in the patient's room. Next, the nurse gives report with all of this information: name, age, physician, diagnosis, oxygen, diet, medication regimen, pain control, fluid balance, mobility, bowel and bladder, labs and tests, any social issues the patient is having, and discharge needs. But oftentimes we were finding that the nurse wasn't giving all of this report, and we would all, and so the multidisciplinary team would say, wait a minute, we got to stop outside the room, gather all this information before we can move on to the next patient, which creates a waste of time for everybody involved. And then the patient isn't getting all that information either, so their plan of care isn't complete in front of them. And then we're just continuing the cycle with the next patient. Maybe they know what's going on if the nurse remembered to tell them, and maybe they aren't sure. And maybe we're giving all of the information and maybe we aren't. So our issue was that patients and families are not fully prepared for MDR, and they're less involved in the process when incomplete information is presented by the nurses. Our background: patients are informed verbally about the MDR process by the nursing staff. The nurses may unintentionally omit this step. 2 out of 5 patients actually expressed surprise when we would come in. It's between 5 and 10 extra people in the room at a time, because we'll have the nurse, a facilitator, physician, case management, dietary, therapy, respiratory, pharmacy. All of those people are involved. So it's quite a shock when we're all in the room staring at you and talking about you. Additionally, delays are created when the nursing staff does not present all the information necessary, which occurred in 7 out of 10 instances. So all of this wasn't given 7 out of 10 times. And the current condition is the same thing that's kind of up here. We're in the room, the patient's surprised, and then they're frustrated when we leave, and we're all frustrated also outside the hall giving the rest of the information, and not everybody's in the loop. Problem analysis: patients are inconsistently prepared for MDR. Why? Because there's no standardized MDR and patient expectation process. Also because there's no written material available informing patients of MDR. And written MDR information is not part of the MDR patient expectation process. Number 2, MDR is delayed while information is compiled. Why? Patient information is not presented consistently. Why is that? There's no standardized tool used to determine the necessary information, and there's no standard structure to the meetings. Our target condition would be for the multidisciplinary team to come into the patient's room when the patient is like, I knew this was happening. My family is here to listen to what's going on, and I'm ready for this. I'm ready, and I'm waiting, and I want to know what's going on with my plan of care. And then when we leave the room, everybody's on the same page. There's no delays, and we move on to the next patient. First patient hears about all the issues, and they're satisfied, knowing that all of these people have a role, and we're taking good care of them. So our countermeasures to help with our issues were to standardize the patient expectation process and incorporate MDR patient information cards into the patient expectation process, which is this. I can pass that around. And then to help with the report, we defined a standardized tool to collect information needed at MDR and standardize the structure to the meetings, which is this. I'll pass around. Our implementation plan: create standardized patient expectation process for MDR is a reflection of our value stream map. Develop patient information cards, which is what Carrie has, and we're passing around. Next, print, laminate patient information cards, and distribute the patient information cards to the room where they're available and the patient can look at them. The nurses still give verbal warnings, but this is something next to their bedside where they can look at, be like, oh, you know, and it's very helpful to see who's going to be there and what's going to go on with the meeting. Second thing, create the standardized MDR meeting structure, develop standardized RN MDR tools, which is what's being customed on this side, educate staff on the standardized tool and distribute the standardized tool to the staff. The cost of implementing this was paper and laminate for information cards, which is a high estimate, $50. And time for staff training, we figured 30 nurses, approximately $27 an hour, would be $810 for a total cost of $860. Patient satisfaction with the process for cost benefit, we decided was priceless because they could come back to our facility, they could refer patients to our facility, our HCAHPS scores will hopefully improve when they're satisfied. The benefit on the nursing report, benefit is time saved per team member when information is presented using the standardized process. Time saved is 15 minutes per meeting, times 10 staff per day, times 5 days per week, sorry this is a lot, times an average of $25 an hour is $16,250 per year saved. Our tests, we interviewed patients and family the second week of June. 17 out of the 20 patients say they were prepared for MDR and unsurprised, so that's an 85% versus the 40% we had before. We monitored MDR rounding, checking off those who presented complete data. And all of the data is presented 70% of the time versus 30% prior to the lead process. And with follow-up, we monitor daily. If there's something left out, we'll get behind with the nurse after the meeting and kind of coach them on that. And we're going to continue to do interviews quarterly to make sure that the patients are ready for this, they know what's happening, we're not surprising or frustrating anybody with the process, and to continue to coach the nurses on necessary data at MDR and keep monitoring that. So I know that was a lot, and that was very quick. Does anyone have questions on that? Yes.
So feedback from patients and families, just anecdotally, have you heard anything, or?
It's a patient satisfier, especially when they are all presenting everything that they want to know. You know, they like to have the physician there, the nurse there, everybody there that they have questions for. If there's extended questions, you know, often the person, like Dr. Knight will say, hey, can I come back later and talk to you about this? We've got a lot more patients to see, and he will. There's always good follow-up in that. So.
And that's gone up on MDRs every so often, and that's what I've seen families come in at that time knowing that they're just going to be rounds.
So we'll give them a time range. We start at 10:15. It usually lasts till around 11. And if your family member is wanting to be there, hopefully they'll be able to be there in this time frame and we'll catch you. Any other questions?
When did you do the test?
The second week of June, which was last week.
And the first one, and the one above that?
December. Anything else?
Does it help with the workflow? Does it help with your guys' workflow?
With the workflow?
Yeah, with the nurses' workflow.
I think it's helped them anticipate what's coming, like what are we doing for this patient? What should I be expecting to be ordered? What should I be thinking about? So in that way, yeah.
I just wanted to say from a personal standpoint, my brother was in the hospital, and it was very nice having that, you know, knowing that's coming, so we could plan on being out there and having the whole team together, so that we knew, you know, where we were at. So, good job.
That's great.
Yeah,
Thank
it was
you.
very, very good.
Any others? Sorry, I'm not very good at this stuff, so.
Don't forget, we have fruit and parfaits in the back and cookies. Are you guys parfaits? Good. Yeah. This report I was here.
So as I was looking at processes to do for this,
lean project, the safety culture survey had just been administered about, 9 months prior to us starting this. And one of the things brought up by the staff members that completed that survey were that they felt that our safety grade was okay, but not that great, not the greatest. That they weren't filling out occurrence reports, that occurrence reports had a lot of issues in general. And then, oddly enough, as I was bringing this up in our lean training, a lot of the staff that were inside the room said, oh yeah, those things are terrible. And so I was like, well, I probably should look into this then, since that's how I get notified about most of their safety problems or risk events. So the process starts with a patient, and the patient has an issue of some type. Doesn't really mean it's a bad issue, just some sort of issue, and they become a harmed patient at that point. And harm is in quotes because it's not necessarily like we're punching that patient. It could be emotional harm, it could be a lot of different types. Then the staff becomes aware either from the patient telling them another staff member, or they learn about it from the chart, and then this staff member chooses to report that information. One of our storm clouds that we saw, if you can see over here, is that the staff may not choose to actually report this issue, which we'll discuss here in a little bit, which I found to be one of our biggest issues, was that reports weren't being completed by staff members with the information. So then once they do choose, they log into the computer and they gather the patient information. And at this point in time, QuadraMed becomes an issue because of the different roles that people have. If it's a nurse, they can see some of the physician stuff. If it's a clinical coordinator, they can see more. So depending on who's completing the report at one point in time, the report is there, and where that report is located. In the ED, almost zero information is usually available at the moment in the record. So even though that's not QuadraMed, it does create an issue right there. So at this point, if they decide to go to they can do one of two ways. They can open an email, type in the information, and send it to me. But that's not the common practice because of what we did when we initiated Midas. We told everyone they had to use Midas. So if they use Midas, if they're using it the first time it's filing their first occurrence report, it gives them an error which they have to go past. It's confusing. A lot of people stop right there. Then in here they have to find the Midas link, do the bypass login, which is that piece. Then they have to enter the patient's medical record number, find the correct encounter via the date, then select the encounter, then go in and enter the appropriate information, describe the interventions, provide supporting information, and then click submit, either via email or in Midas. So this portion right here, even though it seems like it's not very much, actually had so many steps that a lot of the staff members were stopping right here. They were either stopping at bypass login, the ID numbers were confusing, the dictionary entries didn't match what they were trying to say, and so they were either skipping this piece and trying to explain it in the comments, or they were just stopping it altogether. And then at this point, it times out if it sits more than 10 minutes while they're trying to find information. So there's just so many steps in this general piece. Now in our data phase, you can see that it was 1 to 3 days, staff trying to report from the observations that we had, and this is staff reporting to me while we were doing the observation, that they were waiting 1 to 3 days because of how long the process took. Then you see that the time through this whole process is fairly negligible. This is like the high of 1 minute, 1.62 minutes, right? 42 minutes was the high to gather patient information. So you get over here, where the low is like 5.2 minutes to complete an occurrence report. That's very easy, but the high was 203 minutes because it timed out. The nurse had to leave. All the information had to be re-entered. In this one observation, the information had to be re-entered on 2 separate occasions because it would time out. She'd have to go do something. She'd come back, start it again, time out. She'd have to go do something. And so 203 minutes. Now with the whole piece, where most of the time and frustration seem to be in the observations, even though if you look at people that can see it, the value quotient of the process is actually really high with the observations tactic that we used, but it's still 63 minutes on average going for just one occurrence report to be completed. So with that, even though the value quotient was really high, I targeted the many steps storm cloud on this. So then with that one target, we saw that the process itself had a lot of confusion. The 508 employees at our facility, about 53.6 average reports a month here, leads me to believe that we're missing a lot of things. And then the safety culture survey did report that staff didn't really want to fill out occurrence reports. They do on occasion. Most staff, 80% of the people that filled out the safety culture survey had filled out 0 occurrence reports. So that led me to believe that there was a background issue on this. And our issue is that the initiation has many steps and is confusing with all of those. So with this, the patient is in bed, the patient care can be delayed while the nurse is following, and these are footsteps, many steps getting to the actual initiation. Or the report just may not be filed, and then that kind of issue can persist. And so the patient care is delayed because the process takes a long time, and because right now everyone is required to use the MIDAS remote data entry form. And the report may not be filed because the process takes too long, and there are too many steps to initiate the report because they're required to use that remote data entry form. And so what the target, the implementation, was to create an actual initiation or a form that they could use that took fewer steps. And we already had that built into a lot of our current technology in the facility. If you filled out a maintenance work order or an IT work order, it takes about 5 minutes to fill those out, and then you get an email confirmation that it did get submitted and all that. So our countermeasures were to create a new reporting process and then educate on that reporting process. And I'm happy to say that on 6/4, it was rolled out and staff were educated. Well, what was done is a 1-page report where everyone can type in the information and it emails me directly, and then I spend the time to put it into MIDAS. And during the test phase, there was not a test environment, so I had to screw up the intranet for a little while and test it each time I tried to change it, and no one seemed to notice, which was good. It was down for about 45 minutes because I screwed it up bad enough, and then was able to figure it out. And it was rolled out right now. So currently we still have clinical coordinators like Val that are entering medication errors. In the backside, I saw you did that. Yeah, so they're still doing that because she knows how to use the program and it's very easy for her. She gets it on the other end. Doesn't use the same process. But for everyone else, over the last week there have been 20 reports filed in this way. And we'll get to the test piece in a minute. But so the cost of implementation, I overshot this big time because it took me about 30 minutes to build this. But I had said that 6 team members, 20 hours, $45 an hour is a high estimate, and $5,000 and $1,000 to actually do the modification to the internet was $6,400. It probably cost about $20. And then this one article said that if one incidence of preventable harm estimated to cost facilities $53,776. So just one incidence of harm that can be prevented can actually save a lot of cost on this if we can say that we've improved and are more efficient in our reporting and our investigation. So it did get rolled out. The qualitative survey with staff, so what I've been doing is responding to the people that have sent me reports. I've got 20, I've responded to 10. And asked them how they liked the new process. These were all people that had previously filed reports. And when I asked them, I've had good reports so far. They like it, it's very easy, it doesn't time out on them. And so I'm gonna continue doing that sporadically over the next year. Then the safety culture survey follow-up will be in January of 2020. That's just our next survey year. So during that, we'll see how this process is reported and the safety culture overall is reported at the facility with this new process. And then I'm always monitoring occurrence report numbers. So hopefully we'll see that go up with our severity going down. We want a lot of near misses, not a lot of this patient could have died if.
Clay, was that a limited pilot that you said that you had people participate in? Because I wasn't aware that this was live and I'm not even sure where I would go to do it.
I sent the email out to the entire hospital on 6/4. Yeah.
Well, I missed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I missed it too, actually, so that makes me feel better.
Yeah, and I hit high importance on it and was just like, hey, here you go. A really bold type. It's
Okay,
there.
so
I
try
think
it
the
again,
application is
and
sweet.
Yeah, I will. Of the people though that got
So
it,
it's on the intranet?
it's on the intranet. It's on the main page of the intranet. It actually now says occurrence reports, and you click on it, and it gives you the one page.
Okay.
Yeah. I've had 3 reports from the lab, actually.
Well, I usually just say to them, put in an occurrence report. But
Well-
that's kind of lame.
They seem to listen, so it's good.
They'll listen.
So yeah, it's going to be continual though. So we'll have to actually continually educate on this, because as everyone in here probably knows, email gets hit by about 30% of people in the institution. So sending out an email is a good first salvo, but while we're doing rounds and everything else, we'll reinforce the fact that this
Right.
exists and make sure everyone knows. So that'll be ongoing. And then the monitoring of occurrence reports. Any other questions?
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah. I had no idea going into this that it was as big of an issue. Yeah, Jim?
Does it create a lot more work for you?
No, actually, I've been testing that out as a countermeasure on this. Because of the way those emails come in, I can copy and paste most of the data into Midas itself. And then I can pick event types that aren't as AWOL.
Yeah.
And if it's a test, I got to filter them. We had 3 months where I had a test report that wouldn't come off my reports where someone had actually, it said committed suicide. And it was a test because certain departments put in test occurrence reports as a, man, I was on vacation last week if anyone could tell. Competency. So then I missed that and then saw it and was like, somebody committed suicide? No, it was a competency. So right now it's not done anything too terrible.
Previous way that it was occurring, you mentioned that there was different, that the dictionary entries were confusing because of what you picked. So then you on the backside were changing it to match what actually happened as well. So you probably streamlined your process
Yeah.
there.
Actually, right before this, I tried to put in an incident report about something and I was unable because the option for me to, the event that happened wasn't listed and it didn't have an other.
Yeah.
It had no option for me to choose from unless I picked something that didn't
Yeah.
apply to the situation.
So now it's all free text. All of it's free text now. So you type it in and then I'll categorize it on the back end. Yes?
I have, so I guess when we fill out an incident report, I guess my question is, how do we know as leaders that this is being addressed in our department? I know that we've had incident reports filled in and OPED dialysis and different things. How do we know that that's being, because I never get anything back saying
Yeah.
that, you know, this occurred, this many times, how have we addressed it? That's where I'm lagging.
So that was something in Midas that didn't exist. With the current one, you get notifications from me saying this has been filed, this has been filed, this has been filed.
Okay.
The process though, with your department, it's a little bit different than some of the others. Like in Med-Surg, they file, 50 reports a month probably. That's an overshoot, but at least 15. Which then after 3 months gives you a really good trend. I get maybe a report every 2 months from dialysis, right? So it's difficult to trend those things out with those. We do our best, but a lot of times you submit the reports for your department and then you have a solution already inside of your report. Lab is really synonymous with doing this as well. So there's nothing that I end up telling you needs to be fixed.
All right.
Because you're doing something, and as long as I don't see something that continues to happen with that, you've already fixed it. You put in a solution, you're monitoring it, it's fixed.
And we're assuming that you're gonna come back to us and say, whoa, you guys are way out of line,
Yeah,
if we are.
yeah.
Okay, that's what I need.
That's where I need.
It's
to
a
know.
go until I tell you to stop kind of thing, I guess.
Okay.
I hadn't thought about it before that, but yeah.
So in Midas, you could do compliments too.
Yes.
Put compliments in this one too?
You can put them in this. Well, what happened was only you and maybe 2 other people were using the actual Midas remote data entry form for guest relations or grievances or compliments, any of those things. And so it was chosen in that impact analysis that we did to implement this. We replaced all of the easily found remote data entry pieces for grievances on the intranet. So where it used to say guest relations portal now says occurrence reports, if you've seen that. You can still go down to the Midas portion and find that that link is still intact until we get to a point where we feel confident that people won't be putting stuff in there. So you can still do that. You can enter them in here. You can email them directly to April.
And April places too.
Yeah, it will then get into Midas. We're trying to streamline our guest relations process to centralize our response. That's going to be different than this.
Okay. Compliments are important.
Yes, they are. Any other questions? Okay.
I love it when we're told not to use Midas. It's my favorite thing to do. I hate Midas. And you know, I don't feel like I'm that confused. Yes. I'm forced to. Well, and there's lab stuff in there that's not done that I need to do. Feel like. If it's a long time to sit here, 2 hours, go this way. He's not ready for it.
So was your occurrence report have to do with histology or was it specific?
No, it wasn't an occurrence report, it has to do with mostly blood usage and, physicians that follow out.